Who are you to tell me how to live my life? Marcus hissed, his well-groomed face contorted with rage, his expensive $3,000 suit straining against his shoulders. The man opposite him looked at him calmly, even with a slight smile. The tattered jacket, simple jeans, old boots. Nothing about him gave away who he really was. I may be nobody, he answered quietly, but don't you think that a man's real value is not in how much money he has? How dare you? Marcus stopped mid-sentence. His eyes widened as the flight attendant approached the stranger. Mr. Reeves, the captain asked me to tell you that he admires your latest film, she said with a smile. Silence fell over the entire first-class cabin. Marcus turned pale, his hands trembling. He had just humiliated and insulted. Keanu Reeves? The most intense part is still to come. Stay with us to see how it all ends, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss it. Kennedy International Airport in New York was bustling with life, as it always is on a Friday night. People were rushing about their business. Some were late for their flights, some were meeting loved ones, and some were simply watching this endless stream of destinies intersecting in the huge terminal. Marcus Stanton stood in line at the first-class check-in counter, his expensive leather boot tapping impatiently on the marble floor. His Tom Ford suit fit his athletic frame perfectly, his Patek Philippe watch glittered on his wrist, and he held the latest gold-cased iPhone in his hand. His every gesture, every look, was imbued with the self-confidence of a man accustomed to power and wealth. Miss, how much longer do I have to wait? He asked the airline employee with barely concealed irritation. I'm late for an important meeting in Los Angeles. Excuse me, Mr. Stanton, the girl replied, checking his reservation. We'll be done checking in a minute. Marcus snorted and turned away, looking around the room. His gaze fell on a man standing nearby. Something about him caught Marcus's attention, even though he looked like the complete opposite of himself. The man was dressed simply. Faded jeans, an old leather jacket, worn boots, and a simple backpack over his shoulder. He had long dark hair and a short beard with gray streaks. But what really made him stand out from the crowd was the amazing calm he radiated. At this point, the employee finished checking in Marcus and handed him his boarding pass. Have a nice flight, Mr. Stanton. Boarding will begin in 30 minutes at gate 27. Marcus nodded, picked up his documents, and headed to the first-class lounge. As he passed a man in a shabby jacket, he accidentally brushed his shoulder and didn't even apologize. Just gave him an arrogant look, as if to say, watch where you're going. Delta's first-class lounge was the epitome of luxury and comfort. Marcus settled into a leather chair with a glass of Dom Perignon champagne and was immersed in his phone, checking the stock market. He was so engrossed in the numbers on the screen that he didn't notice the man in the shabby jacket enter the lounge. Excuse me, is this seat taken? A calm voice said. Marcus looked up and couldn't hide his surprise. In front of him stood the same tramp as he had managed to mentally christen the stranger. You must be mistaken, Marcus said with a cold smile. This is the first-class lounge. The man nodded slightly, his face remaining impassive. I know. I have a flight to Los Angeles first class, he replied and showed his boarding pass. Marcus narrowed his eyes in disbelief. How could this man afford a first-class ticket? He looked like he could barely afford economy. Sure, Marcus muttered, pretending to be immersed in his phone again, but continuing to watch the stranger out of the corner of his eye. The man sat down opposite him, took a tattered book out of his backpack, and began to read. Marcus couldn't make out the title, but he was irritated by the stranger's calm, his lack of belonging to the world of luxury and privilege, in which Marcus himself felt like a fish in water. Do you often fly first class? Marcus couldn't resist breaking the silence. The man looked up from his book and looked at Marcus with a slight smile. When there is a need. It's interesting, Marcus drawled. Usually in first grade you meet a certain type of person. What type? The man asked, closing the book. Well, you know, successful, wealthy. People who can afford it not when there is a need, but because it is their way of life. The man nodded as if considering his words. Do you think that success is measured only by money? Marcus chuckled. In our world, of course, everything else is a fairy tale for losers. An interesting point of view, the man replied, but added nothing more, returning to his book. Marcus was offended by this calm. He was used to people either agreeing with him or trying to argue, but this strange man simply accepted his words without emotion, as a fact not worthy of special attention. The announcement of boarding for the flight to Los Angeles interrupted his thoughts. Marcus finished his champagne, picked up his briefcase, and headed for the exit. To his surprise, the stranger was right behind him. A small line of first-class passengers had formed at the gate. Marcus stood at the back, followed by the man in the shabby jacket. The elegant middle-aged couple in front of him glanced back, and seeing the stranger, exchanged surprised glances. Marcus felt a perverse satisfaction at their reaction. He wasn't the only one who thought the man was out of place. "Is this your first time flying first class?" he asked loudly, addressing the man behind him so that the other passengers could hear him too. "No, not the first," he answered calmly. "Did you win the lottery? Or maybe this is a charity event for the airline?" Marcus continued, not hiding his sarcasm. Several passengers nearby laughed softly. The man only smiled slightly, but his eyes remained serious. "Neither. I just bought a ticket, like everyone else here." "Well, not like everyone else," Marcus countered, looking down at his expensive suit. "Some of us can afford it on a regular basis, not just once in a lifetime." The man looked him straight in the eyes, and for the first time Marcus felt something strange. The stranger's gaze was so deep and piercing that for a moment he felt uneasy. "You know," the man said quietly, "sometimes what seems obvious isn't really so." Before Marcus could respond, boarding began. He handed his boarding pass to the flight attendant and, receiving it back with a professional smile, headed down the jet bridge to the plane. In the first-class cabin, he was met by a flight attendant who showed him to his seat, a spacious window seat that folded out into a full-size bed. Marcus settled into his seat and watched with satisfaction as the first-class cabin filled up. The same elegant couple entered, followed by an older man in glasses, clearly the head of a large corporation, judging by his appearance and manner. And then Marcus saw him, a man in a shabby jacket who was slowly walking down the aisle, following the directions of a flight attendant. To Marcus's horror, the stranger stopped right next to his row. "Looks like we're neighbors," the man said, pointing to the seat next to Marcus. Marcus felt his face tighten. 4 hours next to this strange guy was not what he had expected when planning a comfortable flight. "What luck," he muttered with barely concealed irritation. The man sat down next to her, carefully placing his backpack under the seat in front of him. He didn't take out his phone or tablet, just sat there, looking straight ahead with an expression of surprising calm. Marcus, on the other hand, ostentatiously pulled out his MacBook Pro, opened a spreadsheet with some complicated calculations, and began studying the numbers with an air of importance. Every now and then he glanced at his neighbor, who seemed to be completely oblivious to him. Once all the passengers had taken their seats and the flight attendants had begun the pre-flight briefing, Marcus closed his laptop and leaned back in his seat. A strange feeling of awkwardness lingered in him. This man next to him was so out of place here, but at the same time so confident. After takeoff, when the plane gained altitude and the seat belts can be unfastened sign came on, beverage service began in the first-class cabin. "What would you like to drink, sir?" the stewardess asked Marcus. "Blue Label whiskey, on the rocks," he replied without looking at her. The flight attendant nodded and turned to Marcus's neighbor. "And you, sir?" "Water, please. Regular." Marcus couldn't help but grin. "Water? In first class?" he asked when the stewardess had walked away. "It's like going to a Michelin restaurant and ordering a sandwich." The man looked at him with a slight smile. "Sometimes the simplest things bring the most satisfaction." "Sounds like an excuse for those who can't afford more," Marcus countered. "Or like the wisdom of those who realize that more doesn't always mean better," the man answered calmly. Marcus felt annoyed. The man spoke in riddles like some kind of Zen master, and it was getting on his nerves. The stewardess returned with drinks. Marcus demonstratively sipped from his glass of expensive whiskey, enjoying its taste and aroma. "By the way, I didn't introduce myself," he said, changing tactics. "Marcus Stanton, investment banker, Goldman Sachs." He extended his hand, expecting it to impress his neighbor. The man shook his hand. "Nice to meet you, Marcus. I'm Keanu." "And what do you do, Keanu?" Marcus asked, emphasizing the name, which sounded unusual. "I work in the film industry," Keanu answered simply. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Cameraman? Lighting technician?" he suggested with undisguised superiority in his voice. "Something like that," Keanu replied, taking a sip of water. "Oh, I see," Marcus nodded, feeling like the winner of this little verbal duel. "Now I understand why you're here. Some Hollywood star probably paid for your ticket?" Keanu looked at him for a long moment, which made Marcus feel uneasy again. "You know, Marcus, You pay a lot of attention to who I am and why I'm here. But the question is, why is this so important to you? Marcus was taken aback by such a direct question. Nothing of the sort, he hastened to object. Just small talk. Kitano tilted his head slightly. Usually small talk doesn't involve trying to put the other person in their place or prove your superiority. Marcus felt his face begin to heat up. This strange man in shabby clothes had just called him out on his behavior. And the worst part was, he was right. Look, Marcus tried to pull himself together. I'm just saying that there are certain places where you meet certain people. First class is a certain level, a status if you will. It's like an exclusive club, and not everyone fits in. Kitano nodded, as if he was really considering his words. Have you ever thought that it is precisely this kind of thinking that creates division between people? That maybe these exclusive clubs only exist in our heads? Before Marcus could answer, the first-class cabin rocked slightly as the plane hit turbulence. The flight attendant asked the passengers to fasten their seatbelts. Marcus would never admit it, but he was afraid of flying, especially during turbulence. His hands involuntarily clenched the armrests, his knuckles turning white. Kitano noticed this and said calmly, "It's okay, it's just normal turbulence. It'll end soon." Marcus wanted to snap back, to say something harsh, but instead he simply nodded, grateful for these simple words of support, although he would never admit it. The turbulence did indeed end soon, and the flight continued in a calm mode. The flight attendant began to serve lunch. Marcus chose a Wagyu steak with truffle sauce, and Kitano a simple pasta with vegetables. You even keep things simple in your food, Marcus noted, cutting into his perfectly cooked steak. I try not to complicate things, Kitano replied. There are too many complications in this world as it is. Marcus shook his head. It's a philosophy of losers. In this world, the winner is the one who takes everything he can. The best wine, the best house, the best car, the best woman. Kitano looked up from his plate. Are you happy, Marcus? The question caught the banker off guard. Yeah. Of course I am happy. I have everything I could ever wish for. And yet you seem tense, Kitano noted softly. Marcus snorted. That's because I work under constant stress. I manage billions of dollars and the fates of companies and people depend on my decisions. That must be a heavy burden, Kitano said without a hint of sarcasm. Marcus looked closely at his interlocutor, trying to understand whether he was making fun of him, but Kitano's face expressed only sincere interest and some strange sympathy. That's life at the top, Marcus replied, adding to his surprise. But yeah, it's damn hard sometimes. For a moment there was something like mutual understanding between them, but Marcus immediately pulled himself together. What was he doing, confiding in this strange man? And you, he asked, changing the subject. Are you happy working? What do you do in the film industry? I'm happy when I do what I love and when I can bring joy to others, Keanu answered simply. It sounds too good to be true, Marcus chuckled. In the real world, things are much more complicated. Perhaps, agreed Keanu, but sometimes we make it more complicated than it really is. The rest of the meal passed in relative silence. Marcus was lost in his thoughts, occasionally glancing at his mysterious neighbor. Something about this man did not give him peace. His calm, his simplicity, his strange wisdom. All this irritated Marcus, but at the same time attracted him like a magnet. After lunch, the flight attendants cleared away the trays, and the passengers were offered dessert and coffee. Marcus chose espresso and chocolate mousse. Kitano declined dessert, asking only for green tea. So, Marcus began, deciding to resume the conversation. Are you flying to Los Angeles for work? Yes, I have filming there, Kitano replied. So what are you filming? Marcus asked with a hint of irony. A commercial? A music video? A movie, Kitano answered simply. Oh, so you're a director? Marcus did not hide his skepticism. Not exactly. Kitano took a sip of tea. I'm an actor. Marcus couldn't help but chuckle. Actor? Seriously? And what movies have you starred in? Anything I might know? Perhaps, Kitano replied, clearly not wanting to go into details. Marcus was beginning to get irritated by this secrecy. Look, I understand that not everyone can be a star of the first magnitude, but at this point they were interrupted by a flight attendant who approached Kitano with a notepad in her hands. Sorry to bother you, Mr. Reeves, she said, her voice clearly agitated, but the captain is a great admirer of your work. He wondered if you could leave an autograph? Marcus froze. his eyes widening in shock. Reeves, as in Keanu Reeves? The same Keanu Reeves, Hollywood star, idol of millions? Keanu smiled politely at the flight attendant. Of course, with pleasure. He took a notepad and a pen, wrote a few warm words and signed it, returning the notepad to the flight attendant. Thank you very much, Mr. Reeves. The captain will be delighted. She thanked him and, casting a curious glance at the stunned Marcus, left. Marcus sat there, frozen in shock. He tried to comprehend that he had been talking to one of Hollywood's biggest stars, the man whose movies he had watched, whose posters hung in his son's room, the legend he had so cavalierly tried to put in his place. Are you Keanu Reeves? He finally managed to say. Keanu nodded, his face calm, without a trace of triumph or malice. Yes, it's me. Marcus felt the flush of shame creep up his face. He wanted to sink into the ground, disappear, be anywhere but here. I didn't know. I didn't recognize you, he stammered. I apologize for everything I said. If I had known, what would change if you knew? Keanu asked. And there was no anger or reproach in his voice, only genuine curiosity. Marcus opened his mouth but found nothing to say. Really, what would have changed? The things he said, the way he acted, all of it reflected his true attitude toward people he considered beneath him. And now he was caught red-handed. I don't know, he admitted honestly. Keanu nodded as if he appreciated this honesty. You know, Marcus, he said, in life it's not so much who you are as how you treat other people. Money, status, fame, all of that is temporary. In the end, what remains is the mark we leave on the hearts of others. Marcus listened without interrupting. For the first time in a long time, he was truly listening to someone without thinking about what to say, how to defend himself, or how to prove his superiority. I was an idiot, he said finally, and I'm sorry. Keanu smiled, and there was something surprisingly warm and sincere in his smile. Admitting a mistake is the first step to change. Not everyone is capable of this. Marcus nodded, still feeling awkward, but at the same time strangely relieved, as if a heavy weight had slowly begun to lift off his shoulders. Can I ask a question? He asked after a short pause. Of course, Keanu answered. Why didn't you put me in my place right away? Why did you just tolerate all this? Keanu thought for a moment. Because anger and condemnation rarely change people for the better. Sometimes you just need to give a person the opportunity to see themselves from the outside. Marcus nodded, realizing the depth of those words. Indeed, if Keanu had immediately introduced himself or responded sharply to his attacks, he would only have strengthened his position, defending himself or attacking even more. One more question, if I may, Marcus continued. Why do you fly first class but dress so simply? Keanu laughed, and it was a warm, genuine laugh. Because comfort for me is not in how I look in the eyes of others, but in how I feel. This jacket, he touched his worn leather jacket, it's been with me for 15 years. In it, I feel like myself. Marcus thought about it. How many times had he bought things not because he liked them or they were comfortable, but because they conveyed his status? How many times had he made choices based not on his preferences, but on what he thought would impress others? The announcement of an imminent landing at Los Angeles Airport interrupted their conversation. Passengers began preparing for boarding, putting away their belongings and fastening their seatbelts. As the plane touched down and began to roll down the runway, Marcus turned to Keanu. You know, I have to thank you. For what? Keanu was genuinely surprised. For the lesson. The most important lesson I've learned in a long time. Keanu shook his head. I didn't teach you anything, Marcus. You came to this conclusion yourself. And yet, Marcus insisted, without you, I would continue to live in my bubble, thinking that the world revolves around me and my money. Keanu smiled. Then I'm glad our paths crossed. As passengers began to disembark from the plane, Marcus noticed how people recognized Keanu, how their faces changed, how they whispered among themselves. But the actor himself seemed oblivious to this attention, remaining just as calm and focused. At the airport terminal, they had to part ways. Marcus extended his hand in farewell. It was an honor to meet you, Mr. Reeves. Keanu shook his hand. Just Keanu, please. And the same to you, Marcus. They parted ways. Keanu heading for the exit where his car was probably waiting, and Marcus standing there, watching him go and thinking about how one chance meeting could change your outlook on life. Marcus Stanton sat at the bar of the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, swirling a glass of whiskey. It had been 6 hours since he had landed in Los Angeles, but his encounter with Keanu Reeves was still on his mind. He felt a strange mixture of shame, admiration, and surprisingly, gratitude. Life was in full swing around him. Successful businessmen, Hollywood producers, models, all of them were part of the world he so strove to belong to. Yesterday, he would have been soaking up the atmosphere with delight, feeling at home among the cream of society. But today, something had changed. He pulled out his phone and opened the search engine. Keanu Reeves, he typed and hit search. The screen filled with results, photos, articles, interviews. Marcus began reading, and with each passing minute, he became more and more amazed at how different this man was from the typical Hollywood celebrity. Keanu Reeves donated millions to charity, often anonymously. He started a foundation to support children with cancer after his sister battled leukemia. He waived some of his salary so that studios could hire top actors for supporting roles. And most striking to Marcus, he was known for his modesty and for frequently using public transportation, despite his enormous wealth. "Another whiskey, sir?" The bartender's voice interrupted his thoughts. "No thanks," Marcus replied, putting the phone down. "How much do I owe?" "Everything is already paid for, sir," said the bartender. "By whom?" Marcus asked in surprise. "The gentleman at that table." The bartender nodded toward the corner of the bar. Marcus turned to see a man in his 60s, dressed in a smart suit, raising his glass in greeting. Something about his face seemed familiar, and after a moment Marcus recognized him as James Holland, one of Hollywood's most influential producers. Marcus nodded his thanks, and obeying Holland's inviting gesture, headed towards his table. "Marcus Stanton, Goldman Sachs, if I'm not mistaken," Holland said, extending his hand. "That's right," Marcus confirmed, surprised that such a man knew his name. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Holland." "James, please," the producer smiled. "Have a seat, Marcus. I saw you on the plane today. You were sitting next to Keanu." Marcus felt his face flushed with shame again. Had this man heard their conversation? Seen the way he had acted? "Yes, that's true," he admitted, deciding not to evade the issue. "Keanu is an amazing man, isn't he?" Holland said, as if not noticing his embarrassment. "Yes, he's not what I imagined," Marcus answered honestly. Holland laughed. "No one is what they are made out to be, especially in Hollywood. But Keanu is a special case. You know, in 30 years in this business, I have met hundreds of stars, but only a few remained human, despite the fame and money. Keanu is one of them." Marcus nodded, not knowing what to say. "I noticed the way you interacted on the plane," Holland continued. "It seemed tense at first." Marcus swallowed. "I acted like a complete idiot, to be honest." To his surprise, Holland did not judge him. "You know, Marcus, we are all idiots sometimes. What matters is not that, but how we react when we realize our mistake." These words were so similar to what Keanu had said that Marcus couldn't help but smile. "You're right. And yet I don't understand why you decided to talk to me after what you saw." Holland took a sip of whiskey and looked at Marcus carefully. "Because I saw something you may not have realized yet. I saw how you changed during this short flight. At the beginning, you were one person, and by the end, you were a completely different person." Marcus thought about it. Had he really changed? Or was it just a temporary effect of meeting a movie star? "I'm not sure I've changed," he admitted, "but I've definitely thought about a lot of things." "That's a start," Holland nodded. "You know, in my work, I'm always looking for stories of transformation. People who change, who grow, who overcome their flaws. Those are the stories that resonate with audiences, because deep down we all want to believe that we can change for the better." Marcus listened carefully, feeling that the producer's words were touching something deep inside him. "I have a proposition for you, Marcus," Holland said suddenly. "I'm having a small reception at my house in Malibu tomorrow night. Nothing formal, just friends, colleagues, interesting people. Keanu will be there too. I'd like you to come." Marcus was stunned. An invitation to a private party with one of the most powerful men in Hollywood was something he had never dreamed of. I'm flattered, Mr. Holland, but why are you inviting me?" Holland smiled mysteriously. "Let's just say I have a good intuition for people, and I feel like you're at a crossroads right now, Marcus. You can go back to your old life and forget today as a strange episode, or you can take a step in a new direction. My invitation is an opportunity for the second option." Marcus didn't know what to say. On the one hand, the offer seemed crazy. What was he doing at a Hollywood celebrity party? On the other hand, he felt that if he refused, he would miss out on something important. "Thank you. I'll be happy to come," he finally answered. "Great." Holland took out a business card and wrote an address on the back. "Tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Dress code is casual, no formalities." He handed the card to Marcus, who noticed that Holland had written another phrase next to the address. "Be yourself." "The bar is closing, gentlemen," said the bartender as he approached. "We're leaving already." Holland nodded and stood up. "See you tomorrow, Marcus. I think you're in for an interesting evening." They shook hands and the producer left, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and the mysterious business card in his hands. Back in his room, Marcus couldn't sleep. The events of the day were spinning in his head, giving him no peace. He remembered every word Keanu had said, every gesture, his calm look. How could a man of such fame remain so simple and sincere? Marcus got out of bed and walked to the window. Los Angeles was aglow with a million lights, a beautiful and merciless city where the dreams of some became reality and the hopes of others were shattered. A city of contrasts, like Marcus himself now, torn between the usual way of thinking and something new that was breaking through the cracks in his carefully built armor. He took out his phone and dialed a number, ignoring the late hour in New York. "Hello?" A sleepy female voice answered after the fourth ring. "Hey, Emily," Marcus said. "Sorry to wake you." "Marcus?" His ex-wife's voice was surprised. "Did something happen? Is Josh okay?" "Yeah, he's fine, as far as I know," Marcus replied, feeling a twinge of guilt at not knowing for sure how his 14-year-old son was doing. "I just, wanted to apologize." The long silence on the other end of the line indicated how unexpected his words were. "Apologize? For what exactly, Marcus?" Emily finally asked, her voice wary. "For everything," he said, suddenly feeling a tightness in his throat. "For being a terrible husband. For putting work before you and Josh. For being such a narcissistic jerk." Silence again, but now it sounded less like wariness and more like amazement. "Who are you and what did you do with my ex-husband?" Emily finally asked, a hint of humor in her voice. Marcus couldn't help but smile. "Honestly, I don't really understand what's going on. Let's just say I met someone today who made me take a look at myself from the outside, and I didn't really like what I saw." Emily said. "That sounds intriguing. May I know who this miracle worker is?" "Would you believe it? Keanu Reeves." "Keanu Reeves? That Keanu Reeves?" Emily's voice was disbelieving. "You met Keanu Reeves and he changed your life? That sounds like the plot of one of his movies." Marcus laughed. "I know, it sounds crazy, but it's true. I was on the same plane with him, sitting next to him, acting like a complete asshole, and he was just being himself. And for some reason, that was stronger than all my defense mechanisms." "Wow," Emily breathed. "You know, Josh is going to be thrilled when he finds out. He loves Keanu Reeves." "I know," Marcus said, remembering the posters in his son's room. "Hey, Em, I was wondering if I could come over when I get back from LA. I want to see Josh, spend time with him. Real time, not the usual fancy restaurant for 2 hours and a gift to buy off the guilt." Emily was silent for so long that Marcus began to fear that the connection had been broken. "Emily, I'm here," she said quietly. "Just trying to process. You've always been so busy. I know, and I was wrong. I missed a lot, but I want to try to catch up if it's not too late." "I don't know, Marcus," Emily said honestly. "Josh, he's really upset with you. You missed his birthday last month, remember? He waited for you all day." Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the pain and shame wash over him. He remembered. He was in London, making an important deal. He had sent Josh the latest PlayStation and expensive sneakers, thinking that was enough. "I know I screwed up, Em, and it might be too late to fix it, but I at least want to try." "Okay," Emily said finally. "Come over Saturday. Josh will be home. But Marcus, I'm warning you. If this is just a momentary impulse, if you disappear for months again, don't come at all. I won't let you break his heart again." "I understand," Marcus replied quietly. "Thank you, Em. And again, sorry for waking you." "It's okay," she said more softly. "And Marcus, if you've really changed, I'm happy for you." "Really?" They said goodbye, and Marcus lowered the phone, feeling a strange mixture of emotions, regret for the past and hope for the future. Something was beginning to change inside him, as if the ice that had been encasing his heart for years was beginning to melt under the influence of an invisible heat. He lay down on his bed and for the first time in a long time fell asleep without the help of sleeping pills, with the thought that tomorrow could be the beginning of something new. Part 3. An Evening of Revelations. The next day, Marcus spent the morning in business meetings, discussing funding for a new tech startup. But his thoughts kept returning to the evening ahead. What would he find at Holland's house? How would he feel among Hollywood's elite? And most importantly, would he see Keanu again? After lunch back at the hotel, he was faced with an unexpected dilemma. What to wear? Usually this question was easy for him. An expensive suit, a designer shirt, diamond cufflinks. But today, everything was different. Keanu's words about comfort not being in how you look in the eyes of others, but in how you feel, haunted him. Marcus opened his suitcase and examined its contents. 3 suits, all impeccably tailored, all featureless and identical. None of them reflected his personality because he had long forgotten who he really was beneath the mask of a successful banker. He picked up the phone and called the hotel concierge. "Good afternoon, Mr. Stanton. How may I help you?" A friendly voice answered. "I need help shopping," Marcus said. "Can you recommend a good casual clothing store? Not a designer boutique, but something normal." An hour later, Marcus was wandering around the mall, feeling strangely disoriented among the ordinary stores where ordinary people shopped. When was the last time he had chosen his own clothes without relying on a personal stylist? After 2 hours of searching, he settled on simple dark blue jeans, a soft cashmere t-shirt, and a leather jacket that reminded him of the one Keanu was wearing. Nothing fancy, nothing flashy about status or price, just comfortable quality clothing. Back at the hotel, he tried on his new clothes and looked at himself in the mirror. The man looking back at him looked younger, more relaxed, more like the Princeton student Marcus than the tough, calculating banker he had become. At 7:30, he got into an Uber, refusing the hotel's offer to call him a limo. The drive to Malibu took about 40 minutes, and the entire time Marcus stared out the window at the Los Angeles skyline, trying to calm his nerves and the strange feeling that tonight would somehow change his life. James Holland's home was an impressive, but not flashy oceanfront mansion. Modern architecture, lots of glass, open spaces, and a stunning view of the Pacific Ocean. When the Uber pulled up to the gate, the guard checked Marcus's name on the guest list and let him in. Holland himself met him at the front door. "Marcus, I'm glad you came." The producer looked at his outfit with approval. "And I see you took the dress code seriously." "I decided to try something new," Marcus said, shaking the outstretched hand. "And how do you feel?" "It's weird," Marcus admitted honestly, "but not in a bad way." Holland laughed. "Achtamawan. Follow me. I will introduce you to people." He led Marcus through a spacious living room filled with guests and onto a terrace overlooking the ocean. The party was in full swing, but the atmosphere was nothing like Marcus had expected. No glitz, no photographers, no pretentiousness, just people socializing in a relaxed atmosphere. "A lot of people think Hollywood parties are all about glamour and pomp," Holland said, as if reading his mind. "Maybe some are, but not mine. I prefer to gather people who are interesting to talk to, not people who are good to take Instagram photos with." Marcus nodded, realizing that Holland had hit the nail on the head again. Indeed, he had expected to see something more like the ostentatious parties thrown by Wall Street bankers' lots of showy wealth. Little sincerity. "James!" An elegant, middle-aged woman with kind eyes approached them. "Will you introduce me to your guest?" "Of course," Holland smiled. "Marcus, this is my wife, Olivia. Olivia, this is Marcus Stanton, the one I told you about." "That Marcus?" she asked with interest, shaking Marcus's hand. "Nice to meet you." "Likewise, Mrs. Holland," Marcus replied, surprised that Holland had managed to tell his wife about him. "Please call me Olivia," she said, "and don't let James drag you into his endless movie talk. He can talk for hours about a single film." "That's not true," Holland replied jokingly. "An hour and a half at most." Olivia rolled her eyes and walked away with a smile, and Holland led Marcus on, introducing him to the guests. Among them were famous directors, actors, screenwriters, but also people from completely different fields. Scientists, writers, activists. Marcus was surprised to note that most of them behaved simply and naturally, without the celebrity arrogance he expected to see. And then Marcus saw him. Keanu standing at the railing of the terrace, looking out at the ocean. He was wearing the same worn jeans he had on the plane, But instead of a leather jacket, he was wearing a simple black t-shirt. Go, Holland said quietly, noticing where Marcus was looking. I think you two have a lot to talk about. Marcus took a deep breath and walked towards Kitano. His heart was pounding in his chest like crazy. His palms were sweaty. He felt like a teenager going to meet his idol, even though they had already met and talked. Hello, he said, approaching Kitano. The actor turned around and a warm smile appeared on his face. Marcus, it's good to see you again, he said, holding out his hand. Marcus shook it, surprised that Kitano was actually happy to see him. I thought I was the last person you wanted to meet again, he admitted. Keanu shook his head. I don't think so. We all make mistakes, Marcus. It's not that that matters, but how we react to them. You're the second person to tell me that in the last 24 hours, Marcus said with a slight smile. James? Keanu guessed. Yes, we have similar views on many things. They were silent for a moment, looking out at the ocean. The sun had already disappeared behind the horizon, leaving behind a pinkish-purple sky and the first stars. Can I ask a question? Marcus asked. Certainly. Why are you here? I mean, not at this party, but with us, ordinary people? Most stars of your level live in their mansions, surrounded by security, appear only on the red carpet. Keanu looked thoughtful, as if he had never considered the question. Probably because I don't feel any different from everyone else, he finally answered. Yes, I have fame, money, certain privileges, but at the end of the day, I'm a person like everyone else. I like walking the streets, riding the subway, talking to people. That's real. And the rest of life, the limos, the security, the red carpet, it's just a game I sometimes take part in. Marcus listened carefully, trying to make sense of what he heard. Aren't you ever afraid, he asked. I mean, being so open to the world? I'm afraid, Kitano admitted, but fear shouldn't stop us from living. You know, the worst thing is not that something might happen to us, but that we might live our lives without ever knowing who we really are, hiding behind walls and masks. The words hit the nail on the head. Wasn't that what Marcus had been doing his entire adult life? Hiding behind the mask of a tough, successful banker? Behind the walls of his position and money? Afraid to show his real self? Vulnerable, insecure, searching. I called my ex-wife yesterday, Marcus said, surprising himself with his frankness. For the first time in years, I sincerely apologized to her, and I asked if I could visit my son when I got back to New York. Keanu smiled, and Marcus saw genuine joy in his eyes. That's wonderful, Marcus. Family is the most valuable thing we have. I realized it too late, Marcus said bitterly. Emily left me 3 years ago. Josh was 11 then. I was so consumed with work, so obsessed with success, that I didn't notice how I was destroying the most important thing. It's never too late to start correcting mistakes, Kitano said softly. Believe me, I know what I'm talking about. There was so much sincerity and understanding in his voice that Marcus felt a lump rise in his throat. When was the last time he had discussed his feelings and regrets with someone? When had he opened up like he was doing now? Marcus! Keanu! Holland came up to them with glasses in his hands. Ilantonon. There you are. I thought you could have a drink. He handed them glasses of amber liquid. Your favorite whiskey, Keanu, and the same for you, Marcus. I hope you don't mind. Thank you, James, said Keanu, accepting the glass. Thank you, Marcus nodded, taking a sip. The whiskey was excellent, rich with hints of smoke and honey. Enjoying your evening? Holland asked. Very, Marcus answered sincerely. You have a beautiful home and amazing guests. I try to bring together interesting people, Holland said. You know, there's so much fakery in our business. People are constantly playing roles even when the cameras are off. I like to create a space where you can be yourself. That's rare in any business, not just yours, Marcus said. The financial world has the same problems. True, Holland agreed. But you know what I've noticed over the years? Real stars, real talents. They don't need masks. They're so confident that they can allow themselves to be vulnerable, to be human with their weaknesses and mistakes. Take Keanu, for example. Keanu shook his head in embarrassment. James is exaggerating. Not at all, Holland said. You're one of the few in this business who's remained true to himself despite all the temptations and seductions of fame. Keanu didn't answer, but Marcus noticed how he blushed slightly at these words. Keanu, I need to kidnap you for a while, Holland said. Jennifer wants to talk to you about a role in her new project. Of course, Keanu nodded and turned to Marcus. Sorry, Marcus. I hope we can talk again today. I hope so too, Marcus said, and to his surprise, he really meant it. When Keanu and Holland had left, Marcus was alone on the terrace. He looked out at the ocean, shimmering in the darkness, and thought about how strangely his life had turned in the last 24 hours. Just yesterday morning, he had been sure that he knew who he was and what he wanted. Now everything seemed uncertain, shaky, but at the same time more real than ever before. "They're impressive, aren't they?" a female voice said next to him. Marcus turned around and saw an elegant woman of about 40 with intelligent eyes and a warm smile. "Sorry? Keanu and James," she explained. "They're impressive, so different, but both real. A rarity these days." "Yes, you're right," agreed Marcus. "Excuse me, have we met?" "Oh, forgive my tactlessness," the woman smiled. "I'm Elizabeth Chen, a psychologist. I saw you talking to Keanu and thought you must be the banker from the plane that James was talking about." Marcus felt his face flush. Did everyone here know about his shameful behavior? "Don't worry," Elizabeth said, as if reading his mind. "James didn't say anything bad, just that you impressed him with your ability to change." "I'm afraid he's overly optimistic about my abilities," Marcus said. "Or maybe you're being too pessimistic," Elizabeth countered. "You know, as a psychologist, I see people every day who want to change, but very few are really ready for it. Most are looking for a magic pill, an instant solution, but real change requires the courage to admit your mistakes and a willingness to work on yourself." Marcus thought about her words. Was he really ready for real change? Or was this just a momentary impulse caused by meeting Keanu that would disappear as soon as he returned to New York, to his normal life? "I don't know if I'm ready," he admitted honestly, "but I do know that I don't want to go back to who I was before." Elizabeth smiled. "This is already a beginning. Real changes always begin with the realization that something in our lives is not working correctly." They talked for about an hour more. Elizabeth turned out to be not only a professional psychologist, but also a smart, interesting conversationalist. She said that she specializes in working with people in creative professions, helping them cope with stress, anxiety, and specific problems associated with publicity and fame. "Many people think that being famous is only about privileges and opportunity," she said, "but it's also about enormous pressure, constant control, and lack of privacy. It changes your psyche, changes your relationships with loved ones, and changes your perception of the world." "And how does someone like Keanu manage it so harmoniously?" Marcus asked. "Keanu is an amazing case," Elizabeth said with genuine admiration. "He has what we psychologists call a strong core personality. He knows who he is and what's important to him, and he doesn't let outside circumstances change that. But believe me, he wasn't born with that. He's worked hard on himself, especially after all the tragedies he's had to endure." "Tragedies?" Marcus asked, suddenly realizing how little he knew about Keanu's life off-screen. "Yes," Elizabeth nodded. "The death of his daughter and wife in a car accident, his sister's long battle with leukemia. He's been through more than most can bear, but instead of breaking down or becoming bitter, he found a way to transform his pain into compassion for others." Marcus was stunned. He had not known about these tragedies in Keanu's life. How could a person who had lived through such things remain so open, so kind to the world and to other people? "I didn't know," he said quietly. "It's incredible." "Yes," Elizabeth agreed. "Keanu is a rare person. But you know what's even more amazing? That there is potential for that same inner strength and kindness within each of us. It's just that most of us never find it." Their conversation was interrupted by the clinking of a glass. Holland was attracting the attention of the guests. "Friends," he said when everyone had fallen silent, "I want to thank you for coming today. It is a great joy to see you all together, and I would like to take this opportunity to share some news. Keanu and I are starting work on a new project, a film about transformation, about a man who rethinks his life after a chance meeting." Marcus froze. Could this be about him? About his meeting with Keanu? "The story is inspired by true events," Holland continued, his gaze briefly falling on Marcus. "And I believe it will resonate with many people, because we all need a reminder from time to time of what's important in life." The guests applauded, and Holland raised his glass. "To new beginnings, and to people who are not afraid to change." Everyone raised their glasses, including Marcus, feeling a strange mix of emotions. He was surprised, embarrassed, but at the same time somehow touched that his story could inspire someone to make a film. After the toast, Keanu approached him. "I hope you don't mind," he said with some trepidation. "James and I have long wanted to make a film about re-examining values, and your story seemed like the perfect basis for it." I don't know what to say," Marcus admitted. "It's weird, but somehow it feels good." "Of course, we'll change the names and details," Keanu assured him. "And if you're against it, we'll find another idea." Marcus shook his head. "No, I don't mind. In fact, I'm even flattered. It's just, I thought my story wasn't that special. Millions of people live the same way I do, chasing money and status, forgetting about what's really important." "That's the point," said Keanu. "That's why this story needs to be told. Because it might make someone think, just like that meeting on the plane made you think." They talked for a long time. Keanu told about his vision of the future film, about how important it is for him to create stories that not only entertain, but also make the viewer rethink something in their lives. Marcus listened, increasingly imbued with respect for this man who used his fame and talent not for self-affirmation, but to bring something important and kind to the world. As the party began to wind down and guests began to leave, Holland approached them. "Marcus, how will you get to the hotel? Can I offer you my car?" "Thanks, but I'll call an Uber," Marcus replied. "I can give you a ride," Keanu suddenly offered. "I'm going that way anyway." Marcus was surprised by this offer, but accepted it with gratitude. After saying goodbye to Holland and the other guests, they walked out into the driveway, where a simple black Porsche sat, not the most luxurious car by Hollywood standards, but still impressive. "Is this your car?" Marcus asked as they got inside. "Yes," Keanu nodded, starting the engine. "I like driving myself. It's calming." They drove through the nighttime Los Angeles, talking about all sorts of things: movies, finances, psychology, life. Marcus felt surprisingly comfortable in Keanu's company, as if they were old friends and not people who had met only 24 hours ago. "You know what I realized today?" Marcus said as they pulled up to his hotel. "I spent my whole life chasing money, thinking it would bring me happiness. And now I hang out with people who have more money than I ever will. But they're happy not because of it, but because of other things: their work, their relationships, their ability to appreciate the simple moments in life." Keanu smiled. "Good one. This is one of the most important discoveries a person can make. That happiness is not in what you have, but in who you are and how you live each day." They stopped at the entrance to the hotel and Marcus turned to Keanu, feeling the need to say something important. "I want to thank you," he said, "not for the trip, but for everything, for not responding to my rudeness with anger, for making me think, for showing by your example what one can be." Keanu shook his head. "Don't thank me, Marcus. You made the choice to change yourself. It's your merit, not mine." "Still," Marcus insisted, "without you, I wouldn't have thought about it. Sometimes we need someone to show us that another way is possible." "Then," said Keanu, "maybe it's your turn to be that person for someone else, to pass on what you've received." Marcus nodded, understanding the deep meaning of these words. "I'll try," he promised. They exchanged phone numbers, agreeing to stay in touch. As Marcus stepped out of the car and watched Keanu's Porsche drive away into the night, he felt that this meeting had not been a coincidence, but a turning point in his life. Back in his room, he couldn't sleep, overwhelmed with impressions and thoughts. He opened his phone contacts again and found his son's number, whom he hadn't spoken to in months. It was too late to call, so he decided to write a message. "Hi, Josh. It's Dad. I know I've been a terrible father these past few years, but I really want to fix that. I'm coming over on Saturday and I'd love to spend the day with you. Just you and me. Doing whatever you want. I miss you, son." He hit send, not knowing what Josh would say, or if he would say anything at all. But for the first time in a long time, he felt not anxiety or fear, but hope. Hope that it wasn't too late to fix it, to start over, to be better. Part 4, Return. The next 2 days passed in a blur for Marcus. He held several business meetings, closed an important deal for his bank, but his thoughts kept returning to his conversations with Keanu and the upcoming meeting with his son. Josh responded to his text with a short "okay," which didn't give much hope, but at least it wasn't a refusal. Emily wrote back, confirming that she was expecting him on Saturday for lunch and that Josh would be home. On Friday night, Marcus boarded a plane to New York. Ironically, he was flying first class again, but this time he looked at the other passengers in a completely different way, not judging them by their clothes or their behavior, but seeing each person as a person with their own story, dreams, and struggles. Next to him sat an elderly woman who, judging by her nervous behavior, was afraid of flying. In the past, Marcus would have ignored her, immersed in his laptop. But now he gently asked if everything was okay, and when the woman admitted her fear, he began to talk calmly to her, distracting her from her anxious thoughts. By the end of the flight, she had visibly relaxed and warmly thanked him for his attention. "Pass on what you've received." These words of Keanu's sounded in his head, and he began to understand their deep meaning. Marcus arrived in New York early Saturday morning. Instead of heading straight to his Manhattan penthouse, he headed to the mall as soon as it opened. He needed to buy a gift for Josh. Not a simple payoff of expensive electronics like before, but something that would show he was really thinking about his son, his interests and desires. He remembered that Josh had always loved astronomy, and after much searching, he found a specialty store where he bought a quality telescope and several books on astrophysics. It wasn't the most expensive gift he'd ever given his son, but it was certainly the most thoughtful. Then he drove to the New Jersey suburb where Emily and Josh now lived. The neighborhood was quiet and green, with neat houses and manicured lawns, the complete opposite of the noisy, glittering Manhattan. Marcus parked outside the house he once knew so well and sat in the car for a few minutes, gathering his courage. Finally, taking the gift bag, he walked up to the door and rang the bell. Emily opened the door and Marcus was struck by how good she looked. Fresh, calm, with the soft smile that had once made him fall in love with her. "Hello, Marcus," she said, stepping aside to let him into the house. "Come in." "Hi, Em," he replied, stepping through the door. "You look great." "Thank you," she said, slightly embarrassed by the compliment. "Josh is in his room. He knows you're here, but she's not eager to see me," Marcus finished for her with a sad smile. "I understand." "Give him time," Emily said softly. "He's angry, but he still loves you." Marcus nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. He didn't deserve this kind of understanding from Emily, not after everything he'd done, but he was grateful for it. "I'll go to him," he said, and Emily nodded, pointing to the stairs. As he climbed up to the second floor, Marcus stopped in front of his son's room door. He took a deep breath and knocked. "Josh, it's Dad. Can I come in?" There was silence for a few seconds, then a muffled answer was heard. "Come in." Marcus opened the door to find his son sitting on the bed, holding a tablet. Josh had grown since they last met. His face had lost its babyish roundness. His features had become sharper, more adolescent. But his eyes were the same, dark, inquisitive, so similar to Marcus's. "Hello, son," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice calm. "How are you?" "Fine," Josh shrugged, putting the tablet aside. "And you?" "Better than before," Marcus answered honestly. I brought you something." He held out the gift bag and Josh took it with apparent indifference. When he opened the package and saw the telescope, he froze for a moment, his face twitching as if he couldn't decide how to react. "A telescope?" he asked, trying to keep his tone casual, but Marcus noticed a flicker of interest in his eyes. "I remember how you always loved to look at the stars," Marcus said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Remember that evening on the roof of the dacha when we watched the meteor shower together?" "You were 7 then." Josh nodded reluctantly. "I remember. You promised that we would make this a tradition every year." Marcus felt the words pierce his heart, another promise he hadn't kept. "I'm sorry, Josh," he said quietly. "I've failed you, in more ways than one." Josh looked at his father with such an adult expression that Marcus caught his breath. When did his baby get so old? "Why now?" Josh asked after a long pause. "Why do you suddenly care that I exist?" Marcus took a deep breath. He could have lied, made up some nice story, but he decided to tell the truth. "I recently met a man who made me see myself from the outside, and what I saw, I didn't like it. I realized that I was chasing the wrong things, that I missed the most important things in life. You, your mother, our family." "Who is this man?" Josh asked, and Marcus noticed a note of curiosity in his voice. "You won't believe it," Marcus said with a slight smile. "Keanu Reeves." Josh's eyes widened. "Keanu Reeves? The one. You met Keanu Reeves? Where? How?" Marcus told his son about the meeting on the plane, about his arrogant behavior, about how he did not recognize the famous actor and tried to humiliate him, and about how Keanu's calm wisdom eventually touched something deep inside him. Josh listened without interrupting, his face changing from disbelief to astonishment, and then to something Marcus couldn't quite place. Respect, perhaps. You really didn't recognize him, Josh asked when Marcus finished his story. I have a poster of him in my room. I know, Marcus said, and I see the resemblance now. But then, I just saw someone who didn't fit my idea of what a successful person should look like or act like. I was an idiot, Josh. Yes, I did, Josh agreed, and for the first time in a long time, a shadow of a smile appeared on his face. But not only with Kitano. Marcus nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. I know, and I want to fix it if you'll let me. I know I've missed too much, and maybe it's too late for you to have a father in your life, but I missed the league finals, Josh interrupted. Last month, we came in second. I made the winning basket in the last seconds, but we didn't have enough points. All the parents were there, except you. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the pain from those words spread throughout his body. I'm so sorry, Josh. I should have been there. Yeah, I should have, Josh said, his voice shaking slightly. You know what's so frustrating, Dad? I was still hoping you'd show up. Even when the game started, I kept looking at the doors, thinking you might show up at the last minute. Stupid, huh? No, Marcus whispered, tears welling up in his eyes. Not stupid. I was stupid, thinking that money and status were more important than being with you at times like these. Josh turned away, clearly struggling with his own emotions. We have a match next Wednesday, he said quietly. The last one this season. Marcus understood the unspoken question. I'll be there, he promised firmly. Even if I have to cancel the most important deal of my career, I'll be there, Josh. You're the most important thing. Josh looked at his father, and Marcus saw hope mixed with distrust in his eyes. How can I trust you? You promised so many times, and I let you down, Marcus finished. I know, and I'm not asking you to take my word for it. Let me prove it to you. Day by day, step by step. He reached out and gently touched his son's shoulder. I know I don't deserve a second chance, Josh, but I'm asking for one. Not for me, but for you. Because you deserve a father who will be there for you, who will support you, who will see what a wonderful man you're becoming. Silence fell over the room. Josh stared at the telescope, absent-mindedly stroking the smooth surface of the tube. Marcus waited, not daring to break the silence, understanding how much was being decided in his son's soul. Mom said you were different, Josh finally said, that there was something different in your voice when you talked. I'm trying to change, Marcus answered honestly. I can't promise I'll always succeed, but I promise I'll try every day. Josh looked at his father, and this time there was determination in his eyes. Okay, he said, one chance. Marcus felt a wave of relief and gratitude wash over him. Thank you, he said simply, realizing that no words could express what he felt at that moment. So, Josh said, clearing his throat, what would you like to do today? Whatever you want, Marcus replied. The day is all yours. Josh thought for a moment. We could start by putting this telescope together, he suggested, and then maybe we could throw a ball around in the backyard. I could show you a few tricks I've learned. Sounds perfect, Marcus said, and for the first time in a long time, his smile was completely genuine. They spent the entire day together. They put together the telescope, played basketball in the backyard, where Josh really impressed his dad with his skills, had lunch with Emily at a local pizza place, and in the evening, they went up the hill behind the house to test out the new telescope. The sky was surprisingly clear for New Jersey, and the stars shone brightly like jewels on black velvet. Josh enthusiastically showed his father the various constellations, planets, and galaxies he could find with his telescope. Look, Dad, it's Saturn. Do you see the ring? He exclaimed with the delight of a teenager, momentarily forgetting his resentment and alienation. Marcus looked through the telescope, admiring not so much the beauty of the planet, but the way his son's eyes shone, the way his voice sounded, full of life and enthusiasm. You know what Keanu Reeves said before we broke up? Marcus asked as they took a break, sitting on a plaid blanket and sipping the hot chocolate Emily had brought them. What? Josh asked curiously. He said that happiness is not in what you have, but in who you are and how you live each day. And you know, looking at you now, I realize how right he was. All these years I was chasing what I thought would make me happy. Money, status, power. But real happiness was right in front of me, and I didn't see it. Josh looked at his father carefully. And now you are happy? He asked. Marcus thought about it. Right now, at this moment, with you under these stars, Yes, I am absolutely happy, and I hope that I can create more moments like this. With you, with your mother, with the people who really matter. Josh nodded, as if considering his words. Dad, he said after a pause, I want to show you something. Through a telescope. Marcus peered into the eyepiece again, while Josh adjusted the telescope. Do you see this star? Bright, a little to the side of Polaris? Yes, I see, Marcus replied. That's Vega, Josh said. One of the brightest stars in the sky? You know what's interesting? The light we see from it now left it 25 light years ago. That means we're seeing the past, Dad. We're literally looking into the past. Marcus looked up from the telescope and at his son, amazed at his wisdom. I never thought about it that way, he admitted. Me neither, until I read about it, Josh said. And you know what I thought? That our past is like this light. It's already happened. We can't change it. But what we see now, how we interpret it now, that's in our hands. Marcus felt his heart swell with pride and love for this amazing young man his son was becoming. Josh, you are wiser than me, he said quietly. Josh shrugged, embarrassed by the compliment. Just thoughts, he said. But I think we could try. Not looking at the past as something fixed, but maybe as the beginning of something new. Marcus felt tears welling up in his eyes. I would like that very much, son, he said, not trying to hide the tremor in his voice. Josh shifted awkwardly closer, and after a moment of hesitation, allowed his hand to touch his father's. Me too, Dad, he said quietly. They sat there under the stars, father and son, bound not only by blood but by the hope of a new beginning. And somewhere out there, millions of light years away, the ancient stars continued to send their light across the vastness of space, a reminder that even the most distant and ancient events can one day find their reflection in the present, changing it forever. Epilogue. 3 months had passed since that night under the stars. Marcus sat in the stands of the school gym, cheering loudly as Josh hit a three-pointer to give his team the win in the high school league final. His son's face lit up with happiness as he looked for his father in the crowd and found him, the first to rise to his feet, applauding his success. After the game, they went out to celebrate as a family, Marcus, Josh, and Emily. Oddly, now that they were no longer married, Marcus felt a deeper connection with Emily, based on mutual respect and a shared love for their son. I have new, and Marcus said as they sat in a cozy restaurant, celebrating Josh's victory. I'm leaving Goldman Sachs. What? Emily and Josh both stared at him. I was offered a position at a nonprofit that helps disadvantaged children and teenagers, Marcus explained. The pay is much less, but the work, it's worth it. Dad, are you serious? Josh looked shocked. But you always said your job was everything. I was wrong, Marcus said simply. And I had to meet Keanu Reeves to realize it. Speaking of Keanu, he took an envelope out of his pocket and handed it to Josh. What's this? Josh asked, opening the envelope. His eyes widened when he saw the contents. Tickets to the premiere of Keanu's new movie? And a backstage pass? Dad, is this a joke? No, Marcus smiled. Keanu and I keep in touch. He wanted to meet you. He said any son who could forgive an idiot like me must be an amazing man. Josh laughed, his eyes shining with delight. This is incredible. Thank you, Dad. Emily looked at both of them with a warm smile. You've really changed, Marcus, she said quietly. And I'm happy for you. For both of you. Marcus nodded, feeling gratitude fill his heart. You know what I realized, Em? That life gives us second chances, even when we don't deserve them. And sometimes you have to lose everything to find what's really important. He looked at his son, who still couldn't take his eyes off the tickets, and thought about the amazing journey he'd taken in these months. From a narcissistic, arrogant banker to a man who was finally beginning to understand that true wealth wasn't measured by money, but by love, connections, and the ability to help others. And all this thanks to a chance meeting in first class on a plane with a man who could have responded to his arrogance with contempt, but instead showed him the way to a better version of himself. Pass on what you've received. These words of Keanu became his mantra. And now, looking at his son's happy face, at Emily's warm smile, Marcus knew that he was only just beginning his journey. A journey that would include many difficulties and mistakes, but also moments of pure, unadulterated joy, like this one. I think I need to call Keanu and thank him in person, Josh said, finally looking up from the tickets. Not only for this, he waved the tickets, but for bringing my dad back to me. Emily placed her hand on her son's shoulder. I think Keanu was just the catalyst, Josh. The real change came from within your father. Marcus looked at them both, and suddenly his eyes filled with tears, not of grief or regret, but of pure, unadulterated love and gratitude. I love you so much, he said, his voice shaking with emotion, and I promise that I will prove it every day with my actions, not words. Josh leaned across the table and hugged his father tightly for the first time in years. I love you too, Dad, he whispered, and I'm glad you're back. At that moment, in the arms of his son, with the smile of his ex-wife who had become a true friend, Marcus realized that he had finally found what he had been looking for so long. Not success, not recognition, not status, but true happiness. What had been inside him all this time, waiting for him to be ready to see it. And somewhere out there in Hollywood, Keanu Reeves was working on a movie that would tell this story to the world. A story about how one chance encounter can change two lives, how arrogance can turn into humility, and humility into true strength, and about how important it is sometimes to stop, look around, and ask yourself, who am I really, and what is truly important to me? Because in the end, it's not our accomplishments or our wealth that defines us as people, but how we treat others, especially those who can't give us anything in return. And sometimes it only takes one encounter, one conversation, one moment of insight to change your entire life. Marcus hugged his son tighter, letting tears of joy flow down his cheeks. He was no longer ashamed of his emotions, no longer hiding them behind a mask of strength and control. He finally allowed himself to be just a man, imperfect, making mistakes, but striving to be better. And in this striving, he found his true freedom. I'm proud of you, son, he whispered, more than you can imagine. I know, Dad, Josh replied, his voice shaking with suppressed emotion. I'm proud of you too.